Thanks, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and listening in on our, the Lacy Roadway Reconstruction Project public meeting. So first, I do want to give kind of an overview of kind of why we're all here, but I also want to introduce kind of the project team. You'll mainly be hearing from me, unfortunately, tonight, but there's a lot of great people who worked on this, and if we just could kind of go around real fast so you can know who to direct your questions to at the end. Becky is with ProMega, so she's kind of lead kind of project manager on that side. Debbie, if you want to kind of wave your hand, she's one of our consultants working on, I believe, most of the wastewater stuff and kind of project managing on that side. Ryan is doing a lot of the line work and kind of built a lot of the designs that you guys will see tonight. Dan is doing all the traffic engineering and the roadway stuff. So if you can wave Dan, Dan Ryan. And so those are the main ones. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. And then, of course, Bill, our trusty city engineer, public works director, so kind of shepherding this project, led it so far up to this point. And I'm kind of taking it over. So I'm a bit new to this, but feel free to ask questions and we can always get back to you later. So with that, like I said, I'll be kind of sharing my screen and walking through the project details. And then if you have any clarifying questions, you kind of want to, just interrupt me, feel free. Mostly try to keep it on mute just so we don't get feedback. And then once we get to the end, feel free to give me questions. I know this is a lot of information to digest, so if you have additional questions afterwards, we'll give you some information about how to give us that feedback. So with that, I will start sharing my screen. Can everybody see that okay? Looks like it's coming up. Great. Awesome. So yeah, like I said, so this is the Lacy Road Reconstruction Project. I'll give you a quick agenda. So we're going to be talking about the limits, the need for the project goals and schedule, and then we're going to be working through kind of what the layouts look like, what typical cross sections are, and working kind of down the corridor just to give you a flavor of kind of what the specifics of the corridor design is to date. And then we'll give you some information about the project website and how to give us some feedback. So just jumping back in. So originally, through the CIP process, this project was kind of all slated as one. We moved up the intersection project and, the Lacy roadway project all the way up to, but not including Fitchburg, to be constructed next year in summer 2022. And we're currently working on the design for that. And so I won't really be talking about the Fitchburg intersection project. That'll wait until 2023 design and 2024 construction. So, if you have questions related to that, feel free to voice them. But we're going to be mainly focused on the roadway project, which is about a little bit more than a mile long, and then the intersection project, which includes Seminole Highway and the Badger Street State Trail. So what was the need for the project? Why improve Lacy Road? So there were some existing long-term operational safety needs that need to be addressed. We also wanted to accommodate city growth and redevelopment along the corridor. And then there was also some discontinuous pedestrian bicycle accommodations that we wanted to fix. So diving into the first one, so the vertical and horizontal curves along the roadway didn't meet adequate sight distance for the 50-mile-an-hour road that it previously was. So what the final design will end up doing is kind of bringing the roadway curve down a little bit, so that kind of tapering off some of those horizontal curves as well, and in the end lowering the speed limit to 35 to make these safer and you can actually see over the curve and see if there's an obstacle in your way. So that was one big project, part of the project. And then in terms of kind of the project vicinity growth, there's a lot of development around this area, the Quarry Vista, Stoner Prairie neighborhoods, other development proposed and new industrial park development. So we want to make sure we're accommodating that and kind of urbanizing the corridor to accommodate the future growth. And so from the discontinuous pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, as you can see here, there's a lot of great facilities, the Military Ridge Trail, the Badger State Trail, some on-street bike lanes, a path adjacent to Core Ridge, but not really anything connecting the two. And so this project is really slated to provide potentially that connection between these two areas for pedestrians and bicyclists, as I'll demonstrate here. So with the project goals, so to do that, we're going to continue that multi-use path. We have proposed a 10-foot path along the north side of Lacy Road, and we'll also be installing buffered bike lanes along both sides of the road. And then we're also looking, as part of the intersection project over near Seminole, we're looking at enhancing that crossing treatment for the Badger State Trail. So, and then, along with the intersection project, we're looking at increasing the intersection capacity to be able to withstand, the increased traffic volumes for the next 25 to 35 years. And then looking to accommodate that future growth. We also look to treat the stormwater. We have kind of two basins in this project, an east and west, and we wanted to build and extend our facilities to be able to treat that water before it gets into the kettle or the other basins. And then, additionally, we really do want to try to minimize our right-of-way acquisition and the impacts to neighboring properties and keep kind of our footprint as small as possible and minimize the impacts to the corridor during construction as well. So just to give you a quick kind of overview of where we're at. So we kind of kicked this all off last summer with kind of some of the initial design concepts and working through the analysis of kind of some of the traffic volumes, that sort of thing. And then here we are at the public meeting for line 2. So then kind of next steps would be revising the typical sections based upon any feedback we get today and over the next week. And then we're looking at final design in September with property acquisitions at that time, and then construction from the following spring. So that's kind of roughly our timeline. And then kind of just going into the design construction. So now I'll kind of lay out some of the specifics. This is the meat and potatoes of the project. So what the scope is, the cross sections, the layout, and give you a little bit more information about the construction staging. So as I said, 10-foot multi-use path on the north side, on-street buffered bike lanes, capacity improvements in Seminole. We have 2 wet ponds that we're looking to put in, one for each basin, and extending the storm sewer and sewer utilities and to accommodate the existing proposed development. We're also looking at adding street trees and providing street tree protection during construction where feasible, and then new lighting, pavement markings, and signing along the whole corridor. So along with that, so we have a couple different kind of sections. We have some portions of the corridor where we will be providing medians, and so that kind of is shown below. And then so just kind of walking through the elements. So starting on the south side, we have a 5-foot sidewalk. We have an amenity terrace, amenity zone, buffered bike lanes, 11-foot travel lanes, the median, and then the inverse on the other side with a terrace and a 10-foot bike path. And so we also have some areas of the corridor where we won't be putting in medians, and so that's kind of shown here where we're kind of be narrowing it down. And so just kind of zooming in on and like I said, we'll be putting all this up on the website. So, I know this is a lot of information, but feel free to kind of dive into it more if you have some specific comments on this. So starting on the western side, as I noted, the project does not include Fitchburg Road. We start roughly 250 feet east of Fitchburg Road. So we'll match the existing cross section there, and then we'll widen. So you see kind of on here, I'll give you a quick lay of the land. So you have the temporary limited easement. So this orange line is kind of where we're looking at, potentially grading just during construction, but then, being done after that. The yellow, is for our wet ponds. Those would be the permanent limited easement. And then we also have some pink where we have proposed new right-of-way and then existing right-of-way with the property line. So I'll just kind of walk from west to east, looking through kind of some of the key features. And don't worry, we'll come back to this. I'm sure you'll have lots of specific questions. So as you can tell, is walking along. So we'll be putting in curb and gutter along the whole corridor. Reconstructing driveways. With that, we'll have stop controlled intersections here at Rock Ridge. Moving further east, so we'll be putting in driveways with access easements as necessary. Here's kind of a flavor of what the medians would look like. So we'll try to incorporate grass as much as possible. And then working for the east, we'll move down here. And so this is the connection. Sorry, a little bit of lag. This is the connection with Commerce Park Drive that will be completed as part of this project. Just gonna buffer. Sorry. It's a big file. I appreciate the time it took to get all the line layers on this. So with that, so zooming in just a little bit. So then again, reconstructing these driveways. This is a median section with right turn into Commerce Park Drive. This is the eastern stormwater facility, the wet pond. And then we do have some left turns proposed into a future property that could be going in here. So that's kind of to be determined, but we have kind of that flexibility baked into the design. And so you can see, it goes from this median section down to kind of 2-lane cross section and then back. And then as we get closer to the Badger State Trail, you'll see the design kind of taper off. And so I just kind of want to clarify these are two separate design projects currently. So as I mentioned, these all started at one. Now they've kind of become 3 different projects, and these 2 have been designed separately, but we are starting a design of kind of where this project ends through this intersection, and then kind of including the legs of this intersection. So, note that it does say it dies off here, but we will be continuing through here. And part of the reasons we want to know kind of some of your feedback on what intersection control we want to look at. So you can see, it dies off a little bit there, but that won't be the final construction. We will continue through the Badger State Trail and through Seminole Highway. So with that, I'll just continue on. And so along those lines, I'll kind of give you a quick synopsis of what the existing conditions look like out there on Lacy Road. So, to the left of the screen, you'll see the train movement counts. We took these back in March. When school was still in session, and you can see the AM peak and PM peak represented in the parentheses. And so for the most part, we definitely have some through traffic on Lacy, and then we also have kind of this movement both from Lacy to Seminole and Seminole to Lacy, and then similarly some northbound southbound traffic as well. And so that's kind of the existing conditions in terms of the turning movements. We have 2 alternatives right now to propose. So right now is an always stop. We would be proposing either a traffic signal or a roundabout at this intersection. It is very, very close to the Badger State Trail, and that it would certainly be kind of a design accommodation of how do we integrate that. And in both options, we could certainly talk about putting in a medium refuge island, additional signing, marking, and kind of make it a more enhanced crossing than it currently is. But just running through kind of options. So with the traffic signal, we'd be talking about left turn lanes in all directions, a right turn lane to facilitate this westbound and northbound right turn movement. The estimated cost is roughly $1.89 million with right-of-way acquisition, and then there is some annual maintenance just from the electrical and the kind of maintenance needs if things don't work on it. And then on the roundabout, so right now, again, we're including a bypass lane for this westbound and northbound movement in order to facilitate that movement better. And then the construction cost with right-of-way is roughly $1.64 million. So that gives you kind of an understanding of generally what they are. Just to run through quickly with existing volumes, kind of what level of service, what traffic operations we'd see there. They all function, even the existing always stop control functions acceptably with a level of service C, A, and A in AM and PM peak periods under existing volumes. And there's a lot of data on here, but I mean, for the most part, we're just looking at overall intersection level of service, and that performs well for all of them. But we also want to kind of be cognizant of what volumes are going to come here. So the consultant provided some sensitivity analysis to give us an understanding of what additional capacity what kind of spare capacity do each of these intersection configurations have. And so, the higher number, the better. So in this case, if we can boil it down to like a 2% growth rate, we'd be seeing roughly 15 years of it working as an always stop, 25 years of it working as a roundabout, and 35 years of it working as a traffic signal. So that can kind of give you a general understanding of how long we're talking about, us, and that's again assuming a 2% growth rate with compounding, which is consistent with this area of kind of the increased land use and that sort of thing. So, but this is all to say that it definitely works for the foreseeable future in both alternatives. So. And then this gives you some pros and cons. There's definitely higher spare capacity with the traffic signal. And on the pro side, there's less out direction travel for bikes and peds, but it is higher cost, and there could be some longer wait times for bikes and peds. We'd assume that this wouldn't be coordinated because there's not any signals around it, so it would be relatively quick, but people would have to stop versus kind of a more yield condition in the roundabout. And then with the roundabout, we're talking about lower cost. Bikes and pedestrians cross one leg at a time, one direction of travel at a time. And there's lowered right angle collisions. As you know, everybody has to yield. So we might see increased fender benders, but we wouldn't see that right angle of two vehicles kind of at high speed intersecting each other. And then for some of the cons, it would be difficult for pedestrians with vision impairment to be able to judge a gap. And then there is no emergency vehicle priority or preemption like what a signal could do. So that kind of gives you a sense of what the two alternatives, how they kind of compare to each other. And then along with that, we're looking at kind of an enhanced crossing, as I mentioned, of the Badger State Trail. So in either option, we could certainly consider extending this median island through the trail, signing, marking, potentially an RFB that could be certainly accommodated with these traffic control options at Seminole, and just kind of running down. So it owned by WISTA, maintained by DNR. It's a public trail area, and then it's existing at grade. We aren't looking at doing grade separation at this time, and it would certainly be evaluated as part of that kind of larger effort. And so, if you have feedback on that crossing specifically, feel free to let us know, and we'll definitely take that in consideration with design. So with that, right now, what the plan is with both projects, and this is kind of why we want to package them together from a construction standpoint, is we're planning on fully closing Lacy to through traffic during the project in summer of 2022. And then also closing the intersection of Lacy and Seminole during that time. And with the thought being that if we can close it all, we don't have to do construction staging, that's going to lower the full closure time, save the city some money, and save the residents some headache from kind of extending that traffic closure longer. We would certainly be accommodating for local access and for residents. And then I guess with that, I want to open up to questions and let everybody know that, if you don't get a chance to fully get an answer to your question today, I'm definitely happy to field emails. We have on the website, we have a survey. So, that gives us a little bit more specifics, some drop downs and stuff. And then with that, I want to open up to questions. And please, feel free to raise your hand. I can definitely call on you. Or if I don't see your hand after a little while, just feel free to unmute and start talking. Steve, I see your hand up first.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see some of my old friends. Speaking on behalf of Mike Fitchburg, service area. Is that right?
I think so.
And one of the issues when the urban service area was extended to Lacy Road was that we would have a and it's part of the initially 50-year growth boundary to 2060. So there's not supposed to be any urban development south of Lacy Road at this stretch. One of the concerns of extending the urban service boundary all the way to Lacy Road was that you would have a street that was urban service area on one side and rural on the other. And generally those call for different treatments. And has there been any talk about development south of Lacy Road on this stretch? Because that would be a big change to the comprehensive plan and to the future of the city.
Andrew, if you want me to jump in, actually, the land south of Lacy Road is in the urban service area, and
over by Fitchburg Road, right?
Down there, but actually further up as well. I think pretty much the whole stretch is not very far, but there is some that entire stretch.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Well, was that a comprehensive?
Aaron, this is Jay Hockmuth. I don't believe that any of the land south of Lacy from Seminole to Fitchburg Road is in the urban service area, except for the property that was designated for Edgewood.
No, that's the South Stoner Prairie neighborhood, actually, and it is along that entire stretch.
But it's not in the urban service area. That's a future neighborhood. This was discussed a year ago when the comp plan was updated, and there is no urban service area boundary south of Lacy Road.
Yeah, so I guess right at this moment it isn't, but it is scheduled to be. So unlike, Steve was saying it's not supposed to be for 50 years, actually that's not true. It's in what's approved to be, even though that line has to be moved.
We can have this conversation offline. But I don't believe that's
I'll continue.
That property.
There's the roundabout's to be a single lane, right?
That's correct. That's it.
And is there any short or long range plans for off-road bicycle and pedestrian facilities between the fire station number 1 and Seminole Highway? Because there are none today.
Along Seminole?
Along Lacy Road.
Oh, gotcha. So that would be, so the 2024 project would be looking at reconstructing Seminole and reconstructing Lacy, so north of this intersection and east of this intersection.
Okay, so that's a future plan.
That's a future project, yeah, through Savannah Oaks, and potentially, connecting to Firehouse 1.
Okay, you answered a lot of my questions as you went along, but I'll look forward to being able to look at the slides in more detail. So you'll have the full PDF so we can zoom in?
Yep.
Very exactly. Good. The last thing that I would say is that the projections, and you talked about 2% per year, this is assuming that current trends extend into the future, or the statistical assumption of weak stationarity. And right now, we are not limited by carbon. We should be, but we're not, and we expect to be in the future. So I would be, with possibilities of more transit and less driving, and working from home and Zooming. These are all things that really make long-term projections very suspect. And so I would want to not rely on them. There's lots of articles in the literature about how highway engineers go out and make projections, and then they rarely come true, that there's always less expansion of traffic into the future. So I don't want this to fall into that trap. So that's a comment. I don't think there's a quick answer to it. And I do have a sort of an unrelated question that bears on this in terms of connected bike facilities. There's a ridge in front of the new Sub-Zero Design Center on Seminole Highway north of this project. Is it expected to continue the multi-use path that's currently goes as far south as the business park? Will that extend down to Sub-Zero? And is it anticipated that it will eventually go down to to Lacy?
That's a great question. It's out of the scope of this current project, but certainly we'd be addressing that with the Seminole project coming up next year and into 2024.
Bill says yes. Okay.
But yeah, it sounds like Bill is including that, so that's great.
Okay.
Yes.
And then my last comment is that I would strongly advocate for the roundabout, not only for the lower cost, but for the higher safety. As I mentioned, I don't think that the long-term expansion, how many years this is going to last. It's not going, both treatments are going to outlast the pavement. And so I would argue for the roundabout. It will perform better most of the time, way better than a signal. And during the peak hours, it'll still perform well. And I think that the experience up at Fitchburg and Nesbitt is a great example of that treatment working really well. So I would argue for the roundabout, please.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Awesome. So if anybody else have any questions, you want to raise your hand. And I'll definitely, all right. I think Janelle, I think I saw you next. Oh, we can't hear you, Janelle. I'm not sure. I see you're unmuted, but we're still not hearing you. There you go.
Has a different piece of my technology that it needs.
Yeah.
You hear me now?
Yep.
So to dovetail what Steve was saying, I think the numbers, if memory serves, that we did traffic study somewhere around March, in the March timeframe prior to the pandemic. So that gives us some sense of what's happening at that intersection. I guess I'd like to ask us to consider rerunning those simulations given the recent addition of organizations and housing that is either there, has been added since then, or we know that's coming. So for example, if I take a look at Sub-Zero and Promega, as well as our 2-3 other new organizations that have come in there, I'm going to guess that number is probably somewhere around, let's say 600 employees in total that would be added to that traffic count. We've got approximately somewhere around, let's say 300 to 350 new houses by the time we look at William Ryan phase 1, phase 2, and then the Viridian. If we have that number of houses, we can safely assume that we're going to have 2 cars per house. And so all of a sudden, our numbers are somewhere around 1,200 additional vehicles twice a day that would be potentially using that intersection to come and go. So that may influence what we're actually looking at, and that's the given things that we know. Then I think we also, if we look even a little bit longer term, we can assume we're going to have probably more tenants back in that Sub-Zero Parkway and potentially Edgewood. So if we take a look at what we know that's coming, what we have, and then what's likely, I think that could have a impact on those projections. And so all of a sudden our 2% per year is going to change pretty drastically. So it'd be interesting to see what those numbers look like by the time that we rerun those simulations.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And sorry, the 2% per year was just kind of a ballpark figure that I was using. So the consultant ran kind of a sensitivity analysis to see how much more, if all the movements grew by a factor, how much more capacity could it take? And then I was just kind of backing that into how many years that could be with a 2% growth rate. And Dan, if you have any more specifics, if you want to jump in, go for it.
Yeah, so as part of the existing counts we took prior to the stay-at-home order, by the governor back last March. So we feel confident in those existing numbers. And as part of the forecasting that we do, we went through the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we gave them basically all of those developments that you talk about, sub-zero and all that stuff like that, the anticipated workers and the growth of those subdivisions, and that's part of the forecast that they gave us. We did receive. They're going to actually give us a new one coming up here shortly in a couple months, so we will have an updated one at that time.
Thanks, Dan. And then my personal vote kind of follow what Steve said, assuming that, you know, the needs are met based on that traffic count. I also think that we've seen nice success with the roundabouts. It feels a little bit more fluid, gives some nice dynamics into that space. I think the first one took folks a little bit of time to get used to, but folks seem to be actually preferring that way now.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. So who's next? I think maybe Sue, you might raise your hand. Awesome. Sue.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. A question for someone not in the know. You talk about east and west basins, and you said getting water correctly into those areas before it gets into a kettle. And I don't know which kettle and where the basins are. And then I had sent some other questions with my Zoom application here, and just to, if I can condense them down. It's a scenic drive now, and I'm wondering what happens. I appreciate that the grade is very steep, you know, rising up on the north side and dropping off on the south side. But the appearance of what happened with the development that's already occurred at Fitchburg and Lacy, it just was leveled, and every tree that had been there was gone. So what do we know about what will happen there? And then in the area closer to the Cannonball Trail, there are singular trees, but mature ones on both sides of the Lacy Road. What happens to those?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I think, you know, as you mentioned with the new grading, so I'll answer the forestry question first. And then Debbie, if I can, I might have you kind of weigh in a little bit. You know, stormwater is not my area of expertise. But I can certainly explain kind of where the water's going. Basically, there's two basins, one on either side of the hill, that go into separate places. And so we would just be creating kind of treatment facilities for both of those. But just grab on that forestry question first. So, you know, within the limits as much as possible, we will try to protect the trees in place during construction. And we'll be working with our city forester to do that. And then, you know, we do have a plan to add street trees to our project. I can't speak for developments that were already in place, from kind of what their site plan looked like. But we certainly intend to, you know, preserve some of the trees on here. You raised a very good point in your comment of, you know, how do you preserve that existing canopy during the course of the project and make sure that, you know, even if it does come back, how do you do that in the room? So it's a great point, and it's definitely something we'll be thinking about as the construction and design progresses. So, and Debbie, yeah, you want to jump in? Go for it.
Yep. And actually, I'm going to pass the baton over to Ryan Moe, who did the stormwater analysis,
Okay,
and
great.
he might be able to answer the question better than me.
Sure. So the Commerce Park Drive connection to Lacy will be about the high point of Lacy Road. And then so either side of the road will drain west or east. It might be easier if Andrew, if you have something to look at.
I can share my screen.
The east side will go down to a facility outside of that, right on the screen there, outside the existing closed depression wetland that's all water. So the idea is to treat the water before it gets into that closed depression. I know the city has a study ongoing right now as to what that might function as in the future. And then on the west side, we're creating a new stormwater practice south of Lacy and Fitchburg that will be able to handle that water coming down from Commerce Park Drive to the west.
And that water goes northbound on Fitchburg,
Yep.
is that correct? Okay.
Yep, it'll be treated per the requirements, and then it'll drain to Fitchrona and drain to the north from there.
Does that help, Sue?
And Sue, just as a definition, a kettle is just a depression. So when Andrew referred to a kettle, he means that closed depression that Ryan referred to that we can see right there. Yeah. So that's a kettle or closed depression.
Right,
That help?
There's a lot of kettles in the area, so I wanted to make sure I knew which kettle we were talking about.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Right. Any other questions? I'll look around. I see Steve, you got one. I'll come back to you, Steve. I want to get a few other folks involved first. Diane, see your hand up. And Diane, before you jump in, if anybody has any comments that they want to put in chat, I'm happy to read those off as well if your camera's shut.
Andrew, it's Joyce. Can you hear me?
Hi, Joyce. Yep.
Hey, there is a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. Yep. Diane, did you have trouble? I saw your hand raised. I didn't get a chance to hear you. And you're on mute still, so I don't know if that's holding you up. We did get a question. Yeah, thanks, Joyce, for pointing that out. We did get a question, why are there bike lanes and a bike path? That's a good question. It's certainly something that's coming up in a number of projects. I like to kind of explain it of, there's different types of users. Some might prefer to bike on the roadway, and they might be more confident, and then other ones might, and depending upon where you're coming from and going to, if you're going from a trail to a trail, that's definitely a very comfortable path on the north side. But that doesn't work for everybody if you're making turns and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that we're accommodating, that right of way to bicycle, to all those groups of different bicyclists. So hopefully that helps. And Michael, if you have any follow up, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, look, I asked the question because there aren't a lot of bikes that go down that road right now. It's it's high speed and it's not really bike amenable. And if we're paying extra as a city to get a bigger right of way, then why would we do that if we already have a bike path? But 6 and 1, half dozen the other, it's not a big deal. To some of the other points though, I don't know about these 50 and 60 year kind of traffic projections. I'm skeptical as well as one of the other questioners was. But one thing that I have noticed with the addition of the sub-zero and all of that extra activity, it's a very defined period when they shift over where there's massive amounts of increased traffic. So I don't know how you account for that. If you're looking at averages for a day, if you're looking at like different periods of peak traffic, but it's something I would consider for that Seminole Highway and Lacy intersection. Just throwing that out there because I do live on Schumann, which is right off that, and we have noticed like there are certain 30 to 40 minute windows of the day where that traffic is massive, and then the rest of the day there's nothing. The other point I would make is, look, I lived over in the United Kingdom for 9 years. These roundabouts are awesome. So I'm an advocate with, I think, Steve and some of the others, Janelle. Roundabout would be my preference.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and to your point, there's kind of a peak hour of generation that we might, apply if there's an incredible amount of generation off peak hours. But typically we try to focus on the peak hours because that's where we're seeing, additional traffic from other activities that, kind of in combination we would see the highest volume per 15-minute period. So that's typically why we do that. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. It's something for us to look at.
Anecdotally, we have noticed like there are 30 to 40-minute periods when they shift over. It's the traffic is one after another.
Yeah.
Tough to get out of Schumann Drive, actually.
Okay. That's a good point. Thanks, Michael. Awesome. All right, Diane, back to
Did
you.
I get off unmute? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Good. Okay, good. This is kind of a follow-up or a repetition of what Sue asked. Could you put a map on the screen and show us which trees along Lacy Road for sure are gonna go if, with the construction as proposed? I'm concerned like her about those trees just west of, the bike path. The large trees that look over the road,
Okay.
right now. They're on both sides and they're not really far apart. So I'm wondering if they're necessarily gonna be, those ones right there,
You're
yeah.
talking about these ones right here.
Yeah.
So currently our temporary easement goes behind those. So we would likely be grading, by those. So I can't say for sure that those would be removed. So we'll have to, talk a little bit more about the specifics. Ryan, if you want to jump in about any additional knowledge, but otherwise, I think to the extent we can, but I can't, promise one way or another at this time.
Okay.
Bigger.
Sorry about that.
Is there a possibility they can remain?
Certainly on the south side, I think we have less slope to. Oops, sorry. I'm gonna freeze up my screen again. Sorry, but I think on the south side we have more of a possibility for those to remain. But again, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Let's look here. I think with the width of the road, they're going to be bumping up pretty near them.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take a closer look to confirm that, though.
So it might not be possible, but we'd definitely like to accommodate those if we could.
All right, and what about the trees at the top of the hill, kind of across from Hammersley's office?
These trees?
Yeah, in there.
Yeah, again with Jason Gray to get the slopes to work, we might have issues, and some of those trees might have to go. And just for us to kind of fit with, cut down from that hill. And so, to some extent, some of those might have to. I can't say for sure which ones at this time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry. Ryan, any more feedback on at the hill, at the top of the hill?
I would just add that we are looking at having a steeper slope to minimize the impact as much as we can. We'll be looking at that closer too.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, thanks, Diane. Any other questions? I should look in the chat. Gotcha. So Jay will hit you, and then we'll go back to you, Steve. If that works.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this, and I want to thank everybody for making this happen. I think it's really important that the community have an opportunity to understand what's being proposed and why. I'd like to mention, first of all, that I agree completely that a roundabout is the appropriate way of managing traffic at that intersection for the foreseeable future. I was intrigued by one of the charts you showed that said that over the long term, it had less capacity than a signaled intersection. And well, offline, I'd like to learn more about why that is. But with that said, I'd like to move on a couple of bigger picture questions on this project. When will the rebuild of Seminole between PD and Lacy be done? And will that be 4 lanes where it's now 2, or will it remain 2?
Right, that's a great question. So from my understanding, we'll be designing it in 2022-23 and then constructing it in 2024. And I believe that it's still to be determined which way that's going to go, but I don't believe that we need the 4-lane cross section from the projected volume there. But Bill, definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that.
it's my recollection that with respect to that project, it was added about a year ago at a council meeting to accelerate that project. My next question is, when did this project we're talking about tonight get moved ahead of the project of rebuilding Seminole Highway?
That was before my time, unfortunately. Bill, if you know offhand, otherwise I can get back to you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate an answer to that. Secondly, or thirdly, I'd like to make the point that where are the studies to show that Lacy between Seminole and Fitchburg needs the kind of treatment that you're proposing in this project? Why is it necessary to put curb and gutter on there? Why can't it be left as an urban road with I agree that needs some resurfacing, needs some issues, but putting curb and gutter in and all the other things that go along with that generates a lot more runoff. And given the fact that this project terminates at the western boundary of the city of Fitchburg, and given the fact of what's in the vicinity out there, and given the fact of what's in the comprehensive plan for Fitchburg, I wonder why it's necessary to update this road the way it's being proposed. Why it can't be left in a suburban, rural type configuration, and to the extent capacity increases are needed, do that in a different way. There's only one major intersection in this 1 mile coming in from Commerce Park Drive from the north. And there's none from the south that I'm aware of, and none, again, we're going to have a separate discussion about what is in the comprehensive plan for those lands to the south of Lacy. But to the extent that those remain undeveloped, and given what has been committed to development north of Lacy, I don't understand why this project needs to be done in the configuration that's currently proposed. And if it proceeds on this basis, I think a lot more justification is required. One other aspect of this project, and again, I'm offering this as a member of the motoring public of Fitchburg. These small sequential projects that basically tie up a road for a long period of time need to be avoided. They just simply are not convenient. They create all sorts of issues. And a good example of this now is this project ends at Fitchburg Road at an intersection that's going to be developed eventually. Perhaps it would be better to do this project after Seminole is upgraded, and then, with more information, decide what configuration this project should be. But this all gets back to the question of when did this project get ahead of the line on the rebuild of Seminole Highway between PD and Lacy? And I realize these questions can't be answered tonight, but these are all issues that are out there, because I don't think Fitchburg should be spending money on something like this unless it's really necessary, because there's so many other needs in the city of Fitchburg right now. And this one may be a project that eventually is required or needed, but I don't understand in a priority system of looking at Fitchburg road projects, how this one got to the point it's at right now. And again, it all comes back to a bias on my part, and I believe a lot of other people that live in this part of town, to leave Lacy alone, so to speak, except to the extent of maybe resurfacing, except to the extent of some kind of intersection with Commerce Park Drive. Maybe that should be a roundabout. After all, there's going to be a lot of industrial and commercial development emptying out into that location. So, by the way, with respect to this project, what is that intersection going to be? Is it signaled or will it be unsignaled?
Right now, we are proposing a side street stop condition. That's unsignalized.
But it could, in theory, be a roundabout from the time that it goes into operation, because did I hear you mention a moment ago that the completing Commerce Park Drive north of Lacy to its existing termination, Commerce Park Drive, that's part of this project?
So it's a separate project, but they'll be done concurrently.
Same construction season, okay.
Yep. Okay. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay.
You raise a lot of great points, Jay. I can speak to this project about what, as I reiterate,
Yeah.
what the need for
Just
this
as an
one is, but
example.
how that weighs with
Yeah.
other ones. I'm not sure.
In an example, I could argue that in the ideal world, this project shouldn't be touched until Seminole is completed, the roundabout with Seminole is completed, and whatever is gonna happen at Fitchburg and this project is completed. Or in the alternative, I would really like to see what the traffic staging plan, because if this project is gonna be done in 2022, and it's going to require the closing of the Seminole-Lacy intersection, I mean, there's some detour options, but they're not necessarily the best in the world, so to speak. And I guess that's yet another conversation that we might want to have offline at some point in time.
Sure. That's a great point. Mayor Richardson, I saw you raise your hand. I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I'm only like 90% sure, but I believe that the TID is helping pay for this stretch of road, and that's part of the reason why it's happening right now, just because of time with the TID, I believe. If you'd like, I can pull up also the future, I can share the future urban development area and kind of show you the lands that are kind of okayed to be developed.
Hey, Aaron, I've seen that and I'm satisfied if nobody else.
I'm showing it for you. Yep. Yeah. So this right here is Edgewood College, the land that they got. This pink line is currently Lacy Road. This land right here is currently for sale by the Ralph Richardson estate. And then down here is a development that they did a neighborhood meeting for 2 weeks ago, I believe. And so is being pursued right now as well. So actually, I'm sorry, it's right here. It's currently in the urban service area. So this area is, I know there's been inquiries about it and being considered right now.
The area to the right of your pointer that Edgewood has proposed an athletic complex, that's exactly that. That is not a residential subdivision. It's an athletic complex whose future is yet to be determined. So,
yep.
So basically, the south side of that road is a rural setting, except when you get very close to Lacy.
It's all
Kitrona.
Yeah. Yeah, here's Fitzgerald here.
Yeah. So when, Aaron, when you say a TID, was that created when the lands to the north of Lacy were parceled up and sold and for essentially industrial and commercial?
Yeah, for Promega and Sub-Zero.
So how many years, what's the deadline for using that money for this purpose?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, all things we can talk about, but.
Yeah, I would just say as a developer in the city of Fitchburg, that there's no question that these areas in the future are going to be more densely populated. And I would say that I think the mayor and the city's plan here to do this now while it's still less densely populated will be less of an inconvenience than it would if this is going to need to be done at some point. So doing it now is probably a better time than doing it in 4 or 5 years when it's desperately needed, but there's also a lot more traffic.
Well, when you say done, do you mean put curb and gutter on a road like this, or do you mean resurface this road so it has, and deal with the,
improve it to the ability where it would be appropriate for a more densely populated area. It's going to have to be done at some point. I think I would agree with their decision to do it now. I would be in favor of that.
The capital improvement program of Fitchburg has dozens and dozens of projects in it. And I just question whether this, and I don't know if there's a priority figure attached to each of those projects, but I personally question the wisdom of spending this kind of money to do this kind of work on a road. And I understand your point about it's got to be done eventually, but you know, is that right now or is that 5 years from now or?
Great. Yeah, that's a great point, Jay. And yeah, definitely happy to follow up with you about some of these specifics as I
Sounds
get
good.
more up to speed
And
about them.
it's a fair question, but if it's done 5 years from now, it's gonna inconvenience a lot more people for a longer period of time than if they just did it right now. I know there's a stack of priority lists for the city, and I don't know where this ranks in that stack, but presumably if it's able to be done now, I think it's gonna be less of a hassle now than 5 years from now. So we might as well get on with it.
I guess I have to respectfully question whether that's true or not. If the only development that occurs in this corridor in the next 5 years is what's already been committed to. I'm not sure if whether those industrial facilities that are under construction are in operation right now. And maybe there's other things that are missing here on the justification for this project, but there's plenty of time offline to go through all the things that are question marks in my mind.
Yeah, thanks for
your question.
for raising those points. So yeah, going back to Steve, I think you had and then we'll get some second rounds for Janelle and Sue as well.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Michael that the reason that there aren't too many bikers on that stretch right now is because it's so dangerous. It's a very important route to go to Verona and to the southwest to get to the Military Ridge Trail, but only the most courageous of folks will take that because there's no shoulder and the blind curves and the high speed limit. So I expect that this will be very busy through there. Wanted to ask, when we planned Lacy Road between the community center and Syene, we had a lot of these discussions. And one of the advantages of curb and gutter is that it takes less space and can preserve more trees. I would think that it would be helpful, you're going to maybe lose some trees on one side at least where there are trees on, and I'm talking about large open grown bur oaks. Those are the ones that, that give the Stoner Prairie its character. Those are the ones that we need to preserve, not the ones that are weed trees growing up on the quarry lands. But to get the design speed down on that straight road with few intersections, deviating the road, putting some horizontal curvature into it to get around some trees that are worth preserving would also benefit by helping to lower the design speed of the road. And my last question, I'm going to have to drop off for another meeting coming up at 7. But it looked from your cross section like you're planning 24, not 30-inch curb and gutter. Is that correct?
I believe that's right. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that benefits bicyclists by putting the seam farther out of the way. So we strongly approve of that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Okay, Janelle, or Sue, go for it.
Yes, I was noticing in the chat section, Michael Thorson raised a very good point. If we are having a multi-use path, 12-foot wide on that north side, could we just eliminate the bike lanes within the traffic between the curbs? And then everybody uses the multi-use path, and then we have more room to preserve trees that matter in all the areas. In the area where the Sub-Zero and Promega will be building out in the future, one of the things that might be helpful is a tree survey. What are we talking about? What's there? Because Steve Arnold mentioned, some of those might be weedy and who cares, but on the other hand, we've lost a huge amount of tree canopy due to the emerald ash borer. So tree committee right now is talking about tree diversity. And, the oaks, I'm right in line saying they're very important. They are, but we have to also think about other trees that we can preserve where able.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Great points. Janelle, I think you had something you wanted to say.
Janelle,
Oh,
you're
sorry, you're muted. Oh, and probably your headset too. Yeah. Oh, still muted. There you
How's
go.
that?
That's great.
Thank you. I'm looking at the map that kind of gets over into Commerce Drive. And can you confirm that we're going to have turn lanes for both eastbound and westbound going into that area? So folks that are trying to move through that area, that are trying to work around the traffic coming in for Sub-Zero and Pro Mega, that, are we addressing that in our plan?
We do have auxiliary turn lanes for both left
Okay.
turns and right turns into Commerceburg. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for all the questions. Do we have any kind of additional thoughts or key points we want to make in front of everybody? And then otherwise, I'm definitely happy to get Michael. I saw you unmuted. If there's kind of some finer details that you want to have subsequent meetings about, or if you want to shoot us some comments, feel free to let
I
us know.
wanted to comment on one thing about there's that bike path crossing. I would encourage everyone to think long and hard about how that crosses the Lacy Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I would highly encourage not to put an RFB there.
Yeah.
Those things they just increase. They're a safety decreaser. Everyone thinks they increase safety for bikers, but as a net overall, they just decrease safety for everyone else. I would encourage you to think about something other than that.
Yep, and it certainly is context dependent, where we put them and what goes in, what control goes in at Seminole.
The bikers just don't use them, and that's the problem.
Right.
So, you either have to enforce the bikers use this, or you can't cross, or don't have it.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Michael. Jay, I think you had another comment.
One other just process question. Will a responsiveness summary be prepared for this meeting in the sense of these were the questions, these are the answers? Is that part of the process of developing this project?
Yep, what we're planning on doing is providing some meeting notes based on what questions we heard from you guys and what answers initially were provided. And then if there's any clarifying notes, we'll kind of make that in there as we gather more information for some of those requests.
Thank you.
Andrew, it's Joyce. Dorothy has a question in regards to consideration of burying the power lines along that stretch of the road. Did you guys do any research on that?
That's a very good point. I'm not sure about that. Bill, do you have any feedback on that, or?
The intersection, we did look at that area. It's about $1 million a mile to bury that line, so I don't think we have the funding available to bury it. But that's something to consider.
Thanks, Bill.
Will those poles have to be worked around or moved, or are they outside of the line that we're going to be working on?
We don't have the utility relocation plan yet. We're working with the utilities on that. So some poles may stay. They're looking at relocating some, but we don't know that until we get their plan.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks, Joyce, for letting us know. Sue, I think you have another comment.
Yes, just one last question. Is this meeting there is not being recorded for others to observe in the future? Is that right? Or will there be a link that I can refer to neighborhood association members to look at, to review this?
Yeah, from my understanding, and Scott, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that this will be recorded, and there will be a YouTube link to it.
We are recording right now, and you'll be able to search our website to get the link. Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, if there's any additional, oh, I see comment coming in from Steve. Yeah, I think some difference of opinion with bike lanes with bike paths and also an RFB. So that definitely a lot of considerations to take into account. And I know context matters and kind of what we put in here. So I certainly appreciate the kind of the varied opinions and some of the evidence you guys presented. Any other comments before we kind of wind down? And then I can go over one more time the kind of follow-up comment period. So any hands? I see some RFB discussion in the chat. All right. Not seeing any hands. Hopefully I'm not missing anybody. Feel free to unmute if I am. But otherwise, I'll just quickly share this project information. So we'll be posting this presentation onto the website at this URL. You can search it, and if you get on the engineering website, on our city's website, you can find it. Here's my contact information. If there's any follow-up questions you guys have that are specific, or you just want to kind of talk a little bit more about some of the details. And then there is a survey link on the website. Feel free to use that or email me directly. I'm happy to take either one. They'll go to the same place. And then feel free also to sign up for this Notify Me. We do have a specific project to subscribe to, so you'll be made aware of any updates that come up, both from the design and the construction standpoint. So if you can get your comments back in the next week, we'd really appreciate it. If there's additional discussions we need to have, we can certainly address that at the time. But just want to make sure that we can get some good comments back to our design team without so they can get moving on it. So yeah, with that. Oh, and thanks Ryan for adding that in. The URLs in the chat. So feel free to click on that, and that'll bring you to the project website that you can find the survey link and some more of the details. So with that, oh, Jay, one more thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Closing.
You just mentioned something with regard to the design team, and I think the schedule you put up a while back pointed this out, that the intent is to proceed quickly with design and then have the design ready by late fall, probably, for bidding. So how will the people who participated in this discussion know what the direction to the design team is? I'm assuming the design team are consulting engineers and consulting firms retained by the city of Fitchburg.
That's right.
So how are we going to know and when what the design parameters are for this project? Because there was some, as an example, the issue of whether we really need bike paths next to traffic lanes and then a 10-foot bike path is just one of many things that'll actually have to be decided before direction is given to the design team. And I think a number of people participating in this and a number who weren't here would like to have answers to those questions.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, I just offer it for some way to get the word out in terms of how this is going to move forward.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not advocating for a survey, but certainly if we hear from the public, definitely get the word out to your neighbors if they have opinions on this. We'd like to hear kind of from a diverse group, and specifically some of those key pros and cons of some of these different treatments, so that we can kind of weigh those in terms of kind of how we can best move Fitchburg residents across this corridor. So that's a great point in terms of how we're going to get back to you guys. Certainly we'll be posting kind of the updated designs on the website. So you can kind of weigh in, and we'll have that. We can definitely give us feedback. We don't currently have a follow-up public meeting scheduled. We will probably want to do one specifically oriented towards the Seminole and Lacy intersection once we get kind of a firmed up control there, and we can get into the specifics about what that design looks like. But we're certainly open to suggestion, and I think the feedback mechanism would be what's kind of posted on the website, and then some of these subsequent kind of offline conversations about some of this detail.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can iron out some of these issues, and then get the design moving. So But yeah, thanks again, Jay, and thank you to everybody who participated. I really appreciate taking time and weighing in on this. So what looks like a pretty great project. So thanks again. Yeah, feel free to weigh in, and I wish you all a good night, everybody.